A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my weird prompts. I am Corn Poppleberry, and I am here in our home in Jerusalem with my brother Herman.
Herman Poppleberry, at your service. We have a compelling exploration today, corn. It is one of those topics that feels both incredibly mundane and terrifyingly high stakes at the same time.
Yeah, this one is a bit different for us. Usually, our housemate Daniel sends us a specific audio prompt to react to, but today, we actually picked this topic ourselves. Daniel and the production team were kicking this idea around the house, and it felt like the perfect deep dive for episode 939. It has been on my mind quite a bit lately, especially considering the weight of the world right now in March of 2026.
It is a question of logistics versus humanity, really. We are talking about the architecture of presidential downtime.
Right. We always see the President of the United States behind the Resolute Desk or boarding Air Force One with that iconic wave. But what happens when the leader of the free world just wants to be a regular guy? I am talking about the Netflix paradox. Can the Commander-in-Chief actually binge-watch a series without a national security incident interrupting the season finale? Imagine you are halfway through the final episode of a high-stakes thriller, and suddenly a military aide is tapping you on the shoulder because a satellite detected a mid-range missile test halfway across the globe.
It is a funny image, but it touches on a very serious technical reality. The concept of a lazy Sunday for a president is basically the ultimate stress test for the communications infrastructure of the executive branch. There is no such thing as being off the grid when you are the one person with the authority to authorize a nuclear strike. The illusion of a lazy Sunday is actually a massive, multi-agency operation designed to make the president feel relaxed while ensuring they are never more than 3 seconds away from total global command.
That is the core of it. The illusion of relaxation is actually supported by an incredibly complex, high-stakes framework. Today, we are going to look at the presidential bubble. The technology that follows the president into the bedroom and onto the golf course, and the psychological toll of never being allowed to truly disconnect for 4 or 8 years straight.
And we are not just talking about having a cell phone in your pocket. We are talking about a multi-layered system of human beings and hardware that ensures the president is never more than a few seconds away from the most consequential decisions in human history. It is the intersection of Secret Service proximity and the protocols of the White House Communications Agency, which everyone calls WHCA or WHCA.
So, let us frame this. When we think of the president at home, maybe at a private residence or at Camp David, we think of privacy. But Herman, is privacy even a real concept for the president?
In the way you and I understand it, not in the slightest. If you are the president, your downtime is a managed activity. It is scheduled, it is monitored, and it is secured. The bubble is not just a physical space, it is a digital and procedural envelope. Even when the president is in the residence, they are surrounded by sensors, secure lines, and people whose only job is to watch the clock and the world.
That sounds exhausting. Think about it. Even when you are sleeping, someone is essentially standing watch over your availability. You are never truly alone with your thoughts, because the infrastructure of power is literally built into the walls around you.
Literally. The White House Communications Agency maintains a 24/7 Presidential Emergency Operations Center, or PEOC. It is always staffed. Whether the president is in the middle of a state dinner or fast asleep in the residence, there is a team of people whose entire job is to bridge the gap between the world and the president. They are the human switchboard for the apocalypse.
I want to dig into the hardware of that bridge, because that is where it gets really wild. Most people know about the nuclear football or the satchel, but I think there are a lot of misconceptions about what it actually is and how it functions during downtime.
You are right. People think it is a big red button. It is not. It is officially called the President's Emergency Satchel. It is a 45-pound leather-encased aluminum box, usually a Zero Halliburton model. And here is the thing about downtime. That bag is never more than a few steps away. If the president is watching a movie in the White House theater, a military aide is sitting just outside or in the back row with that bag. If the president is at a private home in Florida or Delaware, that aide is in the next room.
And there are 5 of these aides, right? They rotate?
Precisely. They are mid-level officers, usually majors or lieutenant colonels, from all 5 branches of the military. They are vetted to the highest possible level. Their entire existence for their shift is to be the shadow of the president. They are the human link to the national command authority. Inside that bag isn't a button, but a collection of communication tools and the Black Book, which lists the retaliatory options for a nuclear strike.
So, if the president is in bed, where is the football?
It is usually in a secure location very close by, often guarded by the Secret Service and the military aide who is on duty in a nearby room. But it is not just the bag. The president also has to have the biscuit.
The Biscuit. That is the card with the identification codes, right?
Yes, it is a small plastic card about the size of a credit card containing the gold codes. The president is supposed to carry that on their person at all times. There have been famous stories about this. After the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan in 1981, when they were cutting off his clothes in the emergency room, the biscuit reportedly fell out and ended up in a stray shoe. The FBI actually had to secure it from the hospital floor.
That is terrifying to think about. The most powerful piece of plastic in the world just rolling around a hospital floor while the president is in surgery. But it highlights the point. The president is a walking, breathing node in a global command and control network. Even in a hospital gown, you are still the node.
That is a great way to put it, a node. And to support that node, the WHCA uses what they call Secure Terminal Equipment, or STE. In the old days, these were those big, bulky secure phones with the physical crypto-ignition keys. Today, they have moved toward voice over Internet Protocol systems that are heavily encrypted. When the president goes to a vacation home, the WHCA actually goes in ahead of time, sometimes weeks in advance, and builds a secure network. They install encrypted lines, satellite links, and secure video conferencing capabilities. They essentially turn a beach house into a hardened command center.
In essence, it is not like the president just uses the home Wi-Fi to check his email or watch Netflix.
Oh heavens no, they bring their own internet. They bring their own cellular towers in some cases. They use redundant encrypted satellite communications or SATCOM. This ensures that even if the local power grid goes down or there is a massive cyber attack on the region, the president still has zero latency communication with the Pentagon and the Situation Room. They use a system called the Defense Red Switch Network, which is a global secure voice architecture. It is the ultimate do not disturb bypass.
It makes me think about episode 634, where we talked about the tech on Air Force One, quantum-proofing the skies. It is the same philosophy, just applied to a stationary house or a hotel suite. The goal is to make the president's physical location irrelevant to their ability to command. If the tech works, the president shouldn't even notice the difference between the Oval Office and a cabin at Camp David.
Whether he is at 30,000 feet or in his pajamas in the White House residence, the technical capability is identical. But Korn, you mentioned the psychological side. How does a human being actually function when you know that a military officer with a nuclear satchel is literally standing outside your bedroom door while you are trying to sleep?
That is the part that really gets me. We talked in episode 494 about the hidden architecture of power and how diplomatic cables create this constant stream of information. If you are the president, that stream never stops. Most of us feel stressed when we have a few unread emails. Imagine having a stream of top secret cables, intelligence briefs, and global crises hitting your desk every hour. The pressure to be on isn't just a professional expectation. It is a structural requirement of the job.
And you can't just turn off notifications. You can't put the world on silent mode.
Right? So you have to create these human firewalls. This is where the chief of staff and the personal aides, often called the body man, come in. They have to manufacture artificial downtime. They have to decide what is important enough to wake the president up for. They are the curators of the president's reality. If a minor diplomatic spat happens at 2 in the morning, the chief of staff might decide it can wait until the 6 a.m. briefing. But that is a massive gamble every single time.
That is a massive responsibility. You are essentially acting as a filter for reality. You are deciding what the leader of the free world needs to know and when they need to know it.
It is. And it creates this weird paradox where the president is the most powerful person in the world, but they have the least amount of control over their own schedule. If a crisis happens in the Middle East at 3 in the morning, the president doesn't get to decide to deal with it at 9. The system decides for him. The always-on mandate means the president is a servant to the events of the world, rather than the master of them.
I think about how this has evolved. If you go back to the era of the telegraph or even the early telephone, a president could actually get away for a bit. They could go on a fishing trip and be truly unreachable for a few hours. Teddy Roosevelt used to go on long hikes where his staff couldn't find him. But today, with real-time everything and encrypted video conferencing, that is gone. The tether is unbreakable.
It is. And I think it contributes to what people call the presidential aging process. You see those photos of a president on Inauguration Day versus 4 years later, and they look like they've aged 20 years. I think a huge part of that is the lack of true REM sleep. Not just physical sleep, but the mental state of being truly off duty. You never enter that deep state of relaxation because a part of your brain is always listening for the knock on the door.
You mentioned executive time earlier. That was a very controversial thing in the media, but if you look at it through this lens, it was essentially an attempt to carve out space for his own process, whether that was watching news or making phone calls outside the formal structure. Every president does it differently. Obama famously stayed up very late, often until 2 or 3 in the morning reading briefing papers and writing. He called it his quiet time. It was his way of reclaiming a few hours from the system.
But even then, he was in the residence, and the WHCA was right there. The Secret Service was right there. He was still in the bubble. He was reading papers that were vetted by the system. It is a simulated autonomy.
Let's talk about the Secret Service side of this downtime, because that is another layer of the logistics. If the president wants to go for a walk, it is not a walk, it is a movement.
Right. A movement involving 20 vehicles, a specialized medical team with the president's blood type on hand, a counter-assault team, and a jammer vehicle to block remote-controlled explosives. Even a spontaneous stop for ice cream requires a pre-advanced team to sweep the shop and secure the perimeter.
And that applies even when they are on vacation. When the Bush family went to their ranch in Crawford, Texas, the Secret Service had to secure the entire perimeter. They had to build permanent structures for the guards. When the president went out to clear brush, which was his version of a lazy Sunday, he had an agent with him, a military aide with the football nearby, and a physician within a certain number of yards. He was relaxing in the middle of a small army.
It is simulated relaxation. It is like being in a very high-end, very comfortable prison. You can do whatever you want as long as you stay within the confines of the security apparatus and the communication links. You are the most protected person on Earth, but that protection is also a barrier to ever feeling normal.
And think about the second-order effects of that. If you never have a moment where you are just a private citizen, does your decision-making start to suffer? We know from psychology that forced compartmentalization is necessary for high-level cognitive function. If you are always on, you lose the ability to see the forest for the trees. You become reactive rather than strategic.
That is a great point. And it is why Camp David is so important. It is a military installation, which means it is already secure. It is one of the few places where a president can walk outside without a full motorcade. They can drive a golf cart around. It is as close as they get to a normal life. But even there, the command center is buried under the ground. It is a rustic retreat built on top of a hardened bunker.
Spot on. Camp David is the perfect example of that. It is designed to look like a rustic retreat. The cabins have names like Aspen and Laurel, but it is actually a hardened command node. It is the ultimate weekend at Camp David phenomenon, a controlled environment for simulated relaxation.
So let's look at the pragmatic technicalities of a lazy Sunday. Let's say the president wakes up and says, "I am not doing any meetings today. I am going to sit in the residence and watch football." What is actually happening behind the scenes?
First, the Situation Room staff is still monitoring every single global feed. They are looking at satellite imagery, signals intelligence, and news reports. If a certain threshold is met, they call the signal switchboard. Signal is the call sign for the WHCA. The signal operator then connects to the president's personal aide or the usher's office. They don't just call the president's cell phone.
So there is a literal human chain of communication before the president even hears a phone ring. It is a human firewall designed to protect his lazy time until it is no longer possible to protect it.
Yes, and that is to protect the president's time. But the technicality is that the phone is always there. In the residence, there are secure handsets in almost every room. They are usually red or have specialized buttons for secure lines. They are not just connected to the outside world, they are connected to a dedicated, encrypted exchange that can reach any world leader or military commander instantly.
And what about the internet? We know that modern presidents use tablets and smartphones. How is that secured when they're just lounging around?
It is a nightmare for the IT staff, honestly. They use heavily modified devices. These aren't just iPhones you buy at the store. They have the cameras often disabled or physically blocked. The microphones are controlled, and they run on a secure virtual private network that tunnels everything back to the White House servers. Every app has to be vetted.
I remember there was a lot of talk about how President Trump used his personal phone for Twitter early on, and the security agencies were basically having a collective heart attack.
Because a personal phone is a beacon. It is a tracking device and a listening device. For a president, a lazy Sunday on a personal smartphone is a national security nightmare. The goal of the WHCA is to give the president the functionality of a modern life without the vulnerabilities. But that functionality comes at the cost of total surveillance by your own team. You are never truly private if your own security team is monitoring your data packets to ensure they aren't being intercepted by a foreign power.
That is the trade-off. You get to be reachable, but you are never alone. I want to shift back to the psychological impact of the always-on mandate. We have talked about the hardware, but what about the person? If you are the president and you know that your every move is being logged and that you are the final word on everything, how do you keep from going crazy?
I think you have to have a very specific type of personality. You have to be someone who thrives on that level of engagement. But even then, we see the cracks. You see it in the way they snap at the press or the way they become increasingly isolated. The bubble effect is real. Eventually, the only people you talk to are the people who are paid to be in the bubble with you. Your reality becomes the briefings.
This is where the comparison to corporate CEOs falls apart. A CEO of a Fortune 500 company has a high-stress job, sure. They are always on call, but if they want to go for a drive in their car alone, they can. They can go to a restaurant without it being a major logistical operation. They have a private life that is truly private. The president does not. Legally and structurally, it is a different world. The president is the head of state, the head of government, and the commander-in-chief. Those roles don't pause.
And the law reflects that. The Presidential Records Act means that even your casual notes, or sometimes even your personal reflections, can become part of the public record. There is no true off the clock. You are a public asset 24 hours a day.
So, let's talk takeaways. For our listeners who aren't the president, but who feel the pressure of the always-on digital world, what can we learn from the presidential model?
One thing is the importance of forced compartmentalization. Presidents who survive the office with their sanity intact are the ones who are able to say, okay, for the next 2 hours, I am just a father, or I am just a guy clearing brush. They have to rely on their staff to hold the line. They have to trust the system to only interrupt them when it is truly necessary.
So, building your own personal WHCA. Obviously, we don't have military aids, but we can have systems. We can have boundaries. We can decide what constitutes an emergency in our own lives.
It really is about implementing boundaries in high-pressure environments. If you don't define your downtime, the world will define it for you. The president's downtime is defined by the Secret Service and the WHCA. If you don't have a plan for your own availability, your smartphone and your boss will be your Secret Service. But they won't be looking out for your well-being, they will just be looking for your attention.
That is a powerful realization. The president has a whole agency dedicated to his communications, and even he struggles to find a moment of peace. Another takeaway is the importance of analog time. Many presidents have turned to physical hobbies: painting, woodworking, clearing brush, golf. These are things that require physical presence and take you away from the screen.
Indeed, even if a military aide is 20 feet away, The act of doing something analog, something that requires your hands and your focus, provides a mental break that a digital activity can't. It is a defense against digital fatigue. If you are always reachable, you have to find ways to be mentally unreachable, even if you are physically available.
It is about the quality of the presence. If you are staring at a screen, you are everywhere and nowhere. If you are painting a canvas, you are right there, and that extends to the most basic human needs too, like food. We hear about state dinners, but what about the comfort food during a lazy Sunday?
That is a huge part of the simulated normalcy. Bill Clinton and his McDonald's runs, or George W. Bush and his love for cheeseburgers. But even that is a logistical operation. You can't just have the president order Uber Eats. The White House has its own chefs, but when they are traveling, the Navy mess often handles the food. Everything is screened. If the president wants a burger from a local joint, the Secret Service often has to go in, watch the food being prepared, and sometimes they even buy it under a different name, so the restaurant doesn't know it's for the president until it's already gone. They might buy 5 burgers, and the president gets a random one to prevent targeted poisoning.
It really reinforces that point that every single basic human function, eating, sleeping, watching a movie, is filtered through a national security lens. You aren't just eating a burger, you are consuming a secure asset. And this extends to personal gadgets, right? Like fitness trackers.
That is a major security point. Remember the news about soldiers' fitness trackers revealing the locations of seeker bases because of the heat maps on Strava? The Secret Service is incredibly strict about that now. Most wearable tech is prohibited unless it has been completely gutted of its transmitting capabilities. If the president wants to track his steps, he's probably using a device that has been stripped of GPS and Bluetooth and only syncs via a hardwired connection to a secure computer. No wireless syncing allowed.
It's like living in a permanent state of the 1990s for your personal gadgets, while having the 2030s for your command tech. You have a secure satellite link to a nuclear submarine, but you can't use a wireless Fitbit.
That is a perfect description. It's a weird chronological mismatch. In the world of high-stakes security, convenience is a vulnerability.
The price of security is often a lack of convenience, even down to the Netflix profile. I wonder if the president gets to choose the profile names. Like, does he have a commander-in-chief profile and then a private one?
I suspect it's more like user 1 and user 2. Keep it as anonymous as possible, even in the residence. You wouldn't want the algorithm to start suggesting political thrillers to the guy who is living one.
Probably for the best. You wouldn't want the continue watching list to leak. President watches 3 seasons of Great British Bake Off in one weekend.
Actually, that might make him more relatable. But looking toward the future, do you think this is going to get worse? With AI and even more real-time data, is the president of the future going to be even more tethered?
It is a double-edged sword. On one hand, AI-driven gatekeepers could be much more efficient than human staff at filtering information and protecting the president's downtime. You could have an AI that knows exactly what constitutes a 3 a.m. crisis versus something that can wait until 6.
But on the other hand, an AI can process information so fast that the president might feel even more pressure to respond to everything in real time. The latency between an event and the president's awareness is shrinking towards zero. We are approaching a world where the president is expected to have a reaction to a global event before the event has even finished unfolding. That is a dangerous place for a human brain to be.
It really is. It makes me wonder if the always-on nature of the modern presidency is a bug or a feature of our democracy. We want our leaders to be reachable in a crisis, but do we want them to be so exhausted that they can't think straight when the crisis actually happens? We have built a system that demands the impossible from a human being. We provide the best technology in the world to support them, but at the end of the day, it is still just one person in the chair.
I think we have delivered on our promise to look at both the tech and the psyche today. It is a sobering look at what it means to hold that office. It is not just about power, it is about the total sacrifice of the self to the system of availability. You become a component of the state.
It really is. And before we wrap up, I want to remind our listeners that if you are enjoying these deep dives into the weird architecture of our world, we would really appreciate a review on your podcast app or on Spotify. It genuinely helps us grow the show.
Yeah, it helps. We have been doing this for 939 episodes now, and the community feedback is what keeps us going. You can find our full archive, including those episodes on Air Force One and diplomatic cables we mentioned, at myweirdprompts.com.
Definitely. And thanks again to the team and to Daniel for the inspiration for today's topic. It was a good one to pick ourselves.
It was. It makes me appreciate my own lazy Sundays a lot more, even if I am just a donkey in Jerusalem.
And I am just a sloth. We both value our downtime, that is for sure. All right, I think that is a wrap for today.
This has been My Weird Prompts.
Thanks for listening, and we will see you in the next one.
Until next time, goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My Weird Prompts, that's the flows from sloth, from man, from long-eared host. My Weird Prompts, until next time, stay curious, keep weird.